All right, Mikhaila Peterson, you're known for the lion diet. You're known for your pretty extreme views on diet as far as what's worked for you. But getting to know you, you're not like this person that's this diet zealot that's saying, hey, this is the only way for people. As a matter of fact, you have a really good perspective on this. So what are a few ways that people can have a better well-being, better lifestyle, better health overall without maybe going to the extreme lion diet, red meat only kind of thing?
So normally what I recommend for people who don't want to completely uproot their lives by only eating meat and who aren't suffering from severe chronic ill issues, cutting gluten can be amazing for people. Just a regular person who doesn't have any issues, try cutting gluten. And cutting gluten right now is so easy with all the swaps you can do. Like you can get gluten-free everything now. So gluten-free, that would be like my number one tip. I would also try going dairy-free to see how you feel, because I think that can affect people cognitively a lot. And if you have weight issues, I would cut dairy. So I'd cut gluten, I'd cut dairy, I'd cut soy. Those are the main ones. And then I would try to reduce grain consumption and prioritize eating more meat. So when you have a meal, don't have a meal that doesn't have meat. And if you're eating a meal, try to eat the meat first so you kind of fill up on it, so you're eating less of the other stuff. But those are like the main tips I give out to everybody. And then obviously, like I like to delve into sleep optimization and exercise and all these things. But I think starting with changing your diet, that's how I started. I changed my diet and then that changed everything else. That's when I started implementing like saunas make me feel good. I like cold plunging. I'm exercising. My sleep is better. But that came after the dietary changes. So not very many. Gluten, dairy, soy, and prioritizing eating meat at every meal.
I'll also put a link down below for 30% off your entire first grocery order with Thrive Market. Cool news, I created a nut butter, a dessert nut butter with them. I have one that's macadamia nut butter. I have one that's cinnamon Brazil nut butter. Okay, and then I have one that is also chocolate hazelnut, a lot like Nutella, except they're all sweetened with allulose, so they're super low carb, and you still get the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats, especially in the macadamia nut one. But it also just helps us out, right? I created this product, spent 2 years formulating it with Thrive, so if you give it a shot, I'd really appreciate it. So that link down below, 30% off plus a free $60 gift.
Why do you think it is, and this is a little bit, it's not a loaded question because I really am curious your opinion. Why do you feel removing gluten is so helpful for so many people? Because it helped me, and I didn't even know I had gluten issues. I'm not celiac. I can't really explain. I can go down some like dodgy rodent model research and be like, oh, maybe it's because of prolamins and this and that, and like how it works with TPO antibodies. And that would make sense for someone with autoimmune issues, but I don't have autoimmune issues, and I felt better. Like, do you have any theories there? And like, this is purely your opinion, so it doesn't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter. It sounds really bad.
No one's going to hold me accountable because I'm not a doctor. So from the research I've done, and like you said, it's a guess, it does seem to increase gut permeability in people. And I think you can look at that in animal and human studies, and you can measure that by measuring zonulin levels. Mm-hmm. So just a regular person who eats gluten, their zonulin levels will go up. And that zonulin... How do I word this? Zonulin works on your tight junctions in your gut and it loosens them. So I think if you're eating gluten, you have a more permeable gut. Now for people with celiac disease, their zonulin levels skyrocket when they eat gluten. So their gut just like disintegrates. So they definitely can't eat gluten. But for the average person, it does raise your zonulin levels, which plays on tight junctions in the gut. So that's my theory, is it just allows more things to leak into your immune system, which causes inflammatory responses.
Yeah, it seems like it has to be gut related. I think there's other theories that are out there, but for the most part, I hate the term leaky gut only because it's been over marketed and overhyped, but it's a very real thing.
I hate the term leaky gut too. I have it on my website too, and I hated that. I used to go to naturopaths and be like, "You have leaky gut." Like, that's a stupid name. And so like technically you could say gut permeability, increased gut permeability, which would be more like medically accurate. But naturopaths have been using this forever, leaky gut, and it is kind of a leaky gut, so I'm okay with it now.
For sure. And like when you talk about leaky gut, quote unquote, the lipopolysaccharides, which are essentially the bad components that leak out into the bloodstream and trigger the immune system, they literally use LPS, lipopolysaccharides, in all models of like animal research and some human model research to instigate inflammation. So they will literally take what leaks out of a gut when there is gut permeability. They will literally take that and inject it into mice to make them inflamed. That gives you some context of how inflammatory this is when this happens, right? It's like you have so much of your ability to modulate inflammation, whether it's up or down, is like right around the perimeter of your gut, like right. Just so, I'm inclined to think that's the same too. What about from the dairy perspective? This is a hard one to address as well.
I don't really understand why so many people have issues with dairy. I do know that it's very difficult to stop eating. So when I have people who come to me and they're on the Lion diet, like one of the cravings people have the most is for dairy. I'm not super convinced that people are supposed to be eating dairy in large amounts. But that's just my opinion. Like, I know there's a huge percentage of the population that can't tolerate dairy at all. I mean, Northern Europeans can tolerate dairy fairly well, but the rest of the world doesn't seem to tolerate very well. I have no idea why it causes issues. I mean, obviously baby cows eat dairy and it makes them gain weight. It's like, that's the purpose of milk. So I can understand it for milk reasons. And then there's what is it? You probably know this, casomorphin.
Yeah.
Like that's addictive in dairy, which explains why people have cravings. I don't know how it works from a gut perspective though, and I haven't really thought about it. I just noticed there was a huge pattern of people having especially autoimmune symptoms from dairy and having a very difficult time not eating it. Yeah. And I figured if you really crave something that badly, probably better to cut it out and just see how you feel after 6 weeks or so, and then reintroduce it and see what your body does. Because that kind of addiction towards a food can't be good. But I have no idea how it works in the gut, really. Yeah, no, it's Greek to me as well. I mean, with that casomorphin and BCM7 or BCM7 or in BCM10. So you've got these compounds that are in it that have a morphine-like effect, right? So they have an opioid-like effect. And you can feel that when you eat dairy.
Cheese, it's like, oh my gosh,
great.
This feels,
yeah. I used to have hot milk. I used to have hot milk and cinnamon and sugar on toast before I went to bed every night when I was a kid. And it was like amazing, creme de la creme. And dairy was like one of the main triggers for my extremely severe arthritis. So that was kind of a downer.
Yeah, so even if it's fermented, you have an issue with it. So with yogurt or with kefir or anything like that, it's still problematic for you?
Yeah, and raw. I can't do any of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that I've talked to that it doesn't matter whether it's raw or regular. And I mean, in this day and age, like even if you're consuming just regular organic milk that's not raw, I mean, theoretically it should have all the hormones removed. You shouldn't have that, right? So it's like, because the whole RBST thing, you're probably not getting a lot of hormones coming through the milk. So I have a hard time believing that it's a hormone issue. I think there's something fundamentally like molecularly going on with milk that's problematic for people that are sensitive to it. There's a lot of, and it's one of those things where even for myself, I consume a fair bit of dairy in the form of like raw milk, raw cheese. But even myself, if I remove it, my face looks different.
Yeah, that's annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I get like some circles under my eyes when I have dairy. And I remember I did a video on YouTube a while back, like talking about quote unquote dairy face. And like, cause it's a thing. People talk about like dairy face. I ended up taking the video down because it was like so...
People were not happy.
It was just, well, I was having to kind of cherry pick literature to try to back it up, to understand what was going on. And I realized like, I just don't have an explanation for this. Like just the fact that people end up with getting moon-faced and getting bloated and getting these circles into their eyes and holding a bunch of water in their face when they consume too much dairy. I could like leap over here and try to pull some, there's nothing that's concrete that I could safely say this is what's causing that.
That's kind of what I've found too. Yeah. Like I think gluten kind of makes sense with the increased zonulin levels. But I haven't done, like honestly, I haven't done a ton of research into what the components are in plants that could be causing problems. Like I know there are a lot of carnivores that are like, oh, plants have plant toxins and that's what people are reacting to. And you know, lectins, oxalates, all those. And I believe most of that, but I do think that people who are drawn to specifically the Lion diet, the one I'm on, have something more going on, because no one should be like allergic to carrots, or cucumbers. Yeah. Like I should be able to eat cucumbers.
Yeah, you should be resilient enough to be able to. And
you'd hope so.
Yeah. And the microbiome, and it's highly adaptable. It's like every time you consume something, you're building up an ability to break it down. So I don't think that it's necessarily digestive. I don't necessarily think it's enzyme related. I think there is a core issue at hand with some people where they are ultra sensitive to it, and then it becomes one of these things. It's like the the swimmer's illusion sort of thing, where it's like the people that ended up having the best effect by removing plants, maybe they were sensitive to them, and it's easier for them to say, well, it's because of this, when in reality they were people that were dysfunctional in some way. Their system was not able to. It's kind of how I feel. If I go a long time without eating plants, then I feel fine, and when I introduce them, I feel a little wonky, but then if I eat them for a little while, I'm fine. And so there's something, at least in many senses, where you're going to develop the ability to utilize them, and the plant toxins and the, whatnot, phytic acid and oxalates, in some way could be a hormetic stressor, right? Like maybe it's just enough to actually make you more resilient and stronger.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think my current theory, and I've gone through so many theories about why do I have these inflammatory reactions to all plants? Something's wrong, what is it? And so I'm still searching for what that is. My current theory is I was exposed badly to black mold as a kid, and my immune system just went haywire. And that's also why my mom and dad are sick, because my mom and dad aren't related. So it's not a genetic thing. And so I think, and I know now when I moved to Miami and I moved into a house that had issues with black mold in the HVACs, a bunch of my autoimmune symptoms came back on the diet. And that had never happened to me before. It was what? I'm eating exactly the same way. How could this possibly happen? And it was the air I was breathing. So at the moment, I think these inflammatory responses are from gut damage and mitochondrial damage from exposure to mold. That's my current theory. It might change. But so far, that seems to be spot on. It seems to cover all the symptoms as well.
You mentioned before we were recording about some stuff you're working on to be able to give people sort of easy swaps and things like that. If I were to put you on the spot and say, what are a few things that people could just swap out? Say, hey, get rid of this food and eat this food instead. And again, not going to hold you to anything. It's just your opinion. But just from Mikhaila's perspective, hey, these are some swaps that you should consider. You like this food? Well, sorry, maybe we should rip that one out and put this one in instead.
Well, the first thing I usually recommend for people is stop eating breakfast foods for breakfast. Eat bacon and eggs, eat steak, eat whole foods, quit eating the cereals and the pancakes and the waffles and dessert for breakfast. I think that could make a major shift in most people's lives. If they won't do that, there are some cereals that seem to be better. There's a bunch of paleo cereals out there. I know there's one made from whey that doesn't have grains. So those are easy swaps, but ideally just eliminating breakfast foods is huge. Cutting out dessert. I don't eat dessert. I'd cut out dessert. And then another easy swap. Well, like I said, I think going gluten-free is really easy. If you can just go gluten-free, do that. Even if you're eating the same pizzas and they don't have gluten in it, I think that can help a lot of people's anxiety levels, fatigue levels, crashes in the afternoon. Going gluten-free is so easy. When I went gluten-free in 2015, it was such a pain. There wasn't anything that was gluten-free. Yeah. It was hard. At least in Canada, it was hard in 2015. And now it's everywhere. There's aisles down grocery stores. Even the kind of shifty grocery stores have gluten-free items in them. Not to judge grocery stores too badly, but you can find gluten-free items easily. So breakfast, just switch to actually eating eggs and eggs and bacon. Everybody loves that too. Do that, cut out the breakfast foods, maybe stop eating dessert. Yeah.
If you were to, let's talk seed oils for just a minute here. What is your take, kind of top level, looking down on seed oils, and then we'll kind of unpack it a little bit more.
Okay, I don't know what your take is on this, so we'll see how this goes. There's so much talk about seed oils right now. I don't think they played, okay, I'll be careful with this. For my autoimmune responses, I don't think those were the most inflammatory things I was eating. So canola oil, for example, I would react to canola oil, but soybean oil was way worse. And I don't think I had much of an issue with seed oils. I don't think people should be using them. People used to cook with tallow and butter. That's way smarter. So I'm not a fan of seed oils, but I don't think it's the root of all evil, which I feel has been spread around a lot. Oh, cut out the seed oils, you'll be good. That definitely was not the case for me. Yeah. What's your view on seed oils?
We share a similar view there, because the more that I've become nuanced in how I look at things, and also my own N of one experience, I don't feel particularly great if I have a crappy seed oil, but I also think that there is a very, very bold line. It's very different to have an oxidized, rancid oil of any kind, whether it's a seed oil or even a monounsaturated fat, like an avocado oil or an olive oil that goes rancid. They're harder to go rancid, but they, by all means, there's still a lot of rancid ones on the shelves. So when you're consuming an oxidated oil, like, I don't care what kind of oil it is. If it's oxidated, it's probably problematic. If I could say, okay, I'm going to take a bunch of macadamia nuts and squeeze them into a pressed oil immediately and consume that, I would have zero qualms whatsoever about that. Where I have issues is partially hydrogenated crap, trans fats with the oxidized oil, something that's been like sitting in a tank for deep frying and hasn't been recycled or cleaned. Because when you look at the literature, like as far as the prostaglandins are concerned, like the inflammatory response, omega-6s are not any more inflammatory or less inflammatory than omega-3s. They all end up down what's called the arachidonic acid chain, and they all end up doing the same flipping thing in the body ultimately, to a degree. I mean, they do different things, but omega-6s are extremely important. And 5 years ago, we were demonizing omega-6s. We were saying omega-6s are the problem. And then the literature started to come out saying, okay, maybe omega-6s aren't the problem, so let's just pivot it to being a seed oil discussion altogether, and it's the rancidity and the toxins and this and that. I don't think industrialized oils are a thing that we should be going out and seeking, but I don't think that they're the root cause. I think there's other things going on. Hyperpalatability of them, sure. Like if someone is going to consume a soybean oil, it's going to make a food taste better. And there's some literature I think it's out of Berkeley, that's talking about the effect on endocannabinoid receptors, where seed oils can impact endocannabinoid receptors, making you more hungry. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the seed oils causing the problem, or is it the fact that the seed oils are making people overindulge and eat too much food, and it's just a catalyst to make them feel like crap?
Okay, that's basically how I agree. My reactions, I mean, all the testing I've done is basically on my own body, and my reactions to seed oils were never as bad as my reactions to some foods. So it's just like, dude, that can't be the problem for everyone. You can eat everything else, but seed oils are the issue. Not that people should be eating that. Like, it would be better to deep fry things in tallow or eat it with butter or something like that. But I definitely don't think it's the root cause.
No.
And completely overblown. I also think it's a bit lazy of people. Like, oh, cut the seed oils. That's easy.
Well, people they like to find one single point of failure in their diet, because that's going to be the easiest thing for them to short term say, oh, if I just fix this, then and
that would be nice.
It gives them time, right? Even when I was 100 pounds overweight, that was kind of how I looked at things. Like,
that's how I looked at things too. Gluten.
If I could just fix this.
I was just like, if I get rid of gluten, all my arthritis will go away. Like, all my problems will be solved. There's some literature on how gluten is bad, so that'll work. And it fixed like 5 or 10% of the problem. Like, it was a big problem, but like that was just the start of my food sensitivities.
Yeah. I think my only hope that we can have for humanity, as far as how we look at diets now, is that we can at least come back down to this basic thought that protein is not bad, meat is not bad, plants are not always the enemy, but they might be for some people. Fruits are not always the enemy, but they might be for some people. And I don't know why it's so hard to accept the fact that there can be a bioindividual approach to things. And some of the big researchers out there, some of the people with big names online, I'm not going to name them specifically, they attack the whole bioindividual approach. Like, we are one carbon copy of one another, and denying a lot of I don't want to say they're denying research, but they want to make it seem like we are all one simple system, and it's not how it works.
No, I don't think that's how it works either. And like I said before, I think what you're exposed to in your environment plays a big role. I think it has with my family too. So like genetics, what's in your environment, what toxins you're exposed to, that just changes everything. But you can't assume, like, even the diet I'm on, if that was the diet that was meant for people wouldn't want to eat cucumbers. Like, I wouldn't want to eat cucumbers. I can understand cravings for cake and things because those are hyper palatable and very addictive, but something like a carrot or a cucumber, like, that just sounds crunchy and good.
No, yeah, and you're probably fine if you don't have an issue with them to eat those things.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Mikhaila, where can everyone find you?
I am on Instagram at Mikhaila Peterson. That's mostly podcast content, so my podcast is on YouTube at Mikhaila Peterson as well. And then for Lion Diet information, I have everything for free on liondiet.com. So how to get started on the diet, how to use it as an elimination diet to figure out your food sensitivities, how to reincorporate foods. And if people want to learn about toxin exposure, I started biotoxin.com. And there are hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed studies on mold exposure on there. So if people want to delve into that, if they think they've been living in a water-damaged building and are having autoimmune issues, that's a good place to go as well.
Which is much more prevalent than people think.
Scarily prevalent, yeah.
Well, cool. Well, thanks, Mikhaila.
Thank you.